told her, but she every once in a while I have to bring them up when I'm with somebody, and I've heard that many times. I said, well, you got to relive the past.
Yep. Okay, ready?
All right.
All right. This is an interview at the New York State Military Museum, Saratoga Springs, New York, 23rd of August, 2004, approximately 1:30 p.m. Interviewers are Mike Russert and Wayne Clark. Could you give me your full name, date of birth, and place of birth, please?
My full name is Dominick E. Brignola, and my place of birth is Troy, New York, and I joined the Navy.
When were you born, please?
Oh, I was born in 1925, February 3rd.
Okay. What was your educational background prior to entering service?
Well, I was a senior in high school, Troy High School, and at that time quite a few people were, joining the service, and I wanted to join the Navy, and I had a little difficult time with my mother and father, and finally she consented, and I joined the Navy on December 7th, 1943. Very patriotic.
Mm-hmm.
And went to boot camp at Sampson, New York.
Okay, I'm going to go back 1 second. Do you remember where you were and your reaction when you heard about Pearl Harbor? How did you hear about it?
I was attending a movie at the Proctor's Theater in Troy, New York. I think I can't recall, but that would be in 1941. That would take me back 3 years. That would be about 15 or in that area. And I was attending a movie. I can't remember the movie. But as soon as the movie let out, there was a big gathering out in front of the theater, and everybody was talking about Pearl Harbor. Well, I immediately went home, and my father and mother were there, my brothers and sisters were congregated, and we all sat in the kitchen to discuss this dilemma. And I can recall my brothers saying this war is going to be over in 6 months, and of course I didn't disagree with them because I didn't know much about the politics or the history that was behind it. But it went on for 4 years.
Yes, okay. All right, when did you enlisted in the Navy?
Yes.
When did you enlist?
I went in December 7th, 1941, or 43. I can recall I went into the recruiting office, and my memory's got to come back a little bit, but I didn't leave for boot camp till the 10th of December, but I enlisted on the 7th.
Why did you pick the Navy?
Well, I had always an idea that I wanted to be in the Navy, even though my brothers were in the Army, one in the Air Force and one in the Medical Corps. And I always enjoyed the water and the sea, and I was more sympathetic to the Navy, even though a lot of my buddies were Marines and Army, and a few in the Navy. So it was that I had leaning toward the Navy.
Okay. And you said you went to Sampson for your
boot camp.
Boot camp. Could you tell us about your boot camp experience?
Well, when I got to boot camp, the officer that was in charge of our company, I still remember his name was Bocher, B-O-C-H-E-R. He was a chief petty officer, but he was a phys ed teacher in a high school. And so when he found out that I was a varsity player in basketball and football and track, he made me physical education instructor. So I had to wear an armband, that said PE on it. And I had to take the guys out on the grinder, run them around the grinder, and give them exercises. And they didn't like that because I was only 17, 18 going on 18. And of course, they couldn't help it, but I was instructed to do it, and I did it. And I enjoyed doing it. But it was a little embarrassing because we had men in our barracks. I would say of the 120 that were in that barracks, I'd say about a good third of them were in their late 20s and 30s. Not late 30s, 31, 32, 33. And so a teenager was not too much welcome. We thought we were wet behind the ears, as they say.
Okay, how long were you at Sampson?
Well, the boot camp lasted, as I recall, December, January, and about a little over 8 weeks. A little over 8 weeks. My memory is getting sort of vague there, but then they sent me to motor mag instruction, which I didn't know I was going to be sent, but they parcel you out at that time. And I went to small engine school.
Where was that?
That was at Little Creek or Bradford, Virginia, somewhere. And then from there, I was shipped down to Fort Pierce, Florida for amphibious training. And that's when we really got into the situation, because I was a motor mech on an LCVP, which is a landing craft vehicle personnel, which carried 36 men, or 155 caliber or 150 caliber howitzer and a couple of men, or a Jeep, and it would carry one Jeep, by the way. But most of the time we did at Fort Pierce was we would maneuver, train for invasion, and we would go out and we would have Marines in the LCVPs. And at times we didn't have 36, maybe a 20 or 15 each boat. And you go out and you rendezvous, and then when the flares go up, you go into the beach as an arrow, and you let them off, drop the ramp, and they go in and do what they have to do, and then you try to back off. And you did that many times, but in some areas when we did that training, they had these monstrous cement boulders and implements in the water before the beach. But we didn't make those, the Army engineers did. And to simulate the real stuff, at times they would send the sappers in to blow those up, and then we would go in after. And I think a couple of sappers got killed, by the way, while we were down there doing that job. I didn't want that job, I'll tell you, because they had to let them off in the water, and they had to swim in and tie the demolition on the cement barricades and obstacles. So that was what we did most of the time.
What did you do?
I was a machine motor mech. I had to keep that 6-cylinder diesel engine going. And my job was make sure that enough fuel was in the tanks before we left, check the oil on the thing, on the dipstick, make sure that we were generating enough power. And the most important thing on that LCVP was the sand trap. Now that sand trap, the water, salt water or whatever water, cooled that engine. And if you got on the beach, or if you were near a sandbar, you would pick up a lot of sand, because that would suck in that sand. And if that sand trap clogged, the engine would shut down. And that did many times. So you had to completely dismantle that, even if you had men aboard, and take the whole thing off and wash it in a bucket of water, with the salt water, of course, and then try to reassemble it and put it back in. And you had to do that pretty quick. And that was the most, I would say, heart-wrenching thing, because that happened many times. Because when you go up on the beach and let them off, and sometimes you do let them off, then you try to back off, and you're sucking in a lot of sand, and that shuts the engine down. So that was my job. Motor machinist mate.
Okay. All right, after you were down in Fort Pierce, Florida, how long were you there?
Oh, let's see. February. Oh, I can't recall.
Well,
let's see, maybe a couple of months. Let's see, we got there January. Let's see, December, January, February, March, maybe February, March, something in there. And then April. Then in May, I'm trying to remember. Then May, we were stationed, or we were assigned to what they were called a preliminary crew for a ship. We didn't know what ship number or where it was at. And so now we were starting to train in a big unit, and we went to Little Creek, Virginia, and we had to have gunnery practice there. And by the way, we had gunnery practice down at Fort Pierce too. So the Marines would teach us how to use the Thompson submachine guns and the 30 caliber carbine. We didn't have any Garands aboard ship. And so, and the 45s. And then we would shoot the 50 calibers. And then, so we got training there for artillery and whatever, all the guns that we were supposed to know how to use. And then we were assigned to this group that traveled from Virginia to Evanston, Illinois, to pick up a brand new LST. And we were there, they sent us really to the Navy Pier in Chicago. And that was wonderful duty there because we got all fresh food and everything there, because the food in Fort Pierce was terrible. Diarrhea, quite a lot of diarrhea there. So I tried to get leave because we didn't know how long we were going to be there, but we wound up being there 2 weeks, and we had leave every day in Chicago. But the Navy Pier, we were fed like kings on a table. We ate like no time before that because all the other food at Fort Pierce was crap. And I mean crap. So then we went to Evanston, Illinois, and picked up the LST, went all the way down to Mississippi. Then a shakedown cruise in the Gulf of Mexico for a couple of weeks to make sure the ship was seaworthy. And then the ship was then loaded with an LCT, piggyback, on top deck.
Before you tell that story, you wrote down here a story about some gunnery practice while you were in the Gulf on your shakedown cruise.
Yeah, that was a funny story. I tell that I was because I was on target practice on all the guns. They thought I was a good shot, so they put me on a 50 caliber gun in the after deck, and that would be back here. Okay.
You hold it toward the camera, Wayne could see.
Yeah, that would be back here. That would be the after deck, the 50 caliber, and there would be a 50 caliber on each side, the port and starboard, and I was on the port side. Well, what they would do, the deck apes and the deck gang, when they swabbed the deck and everything, they had a rack on the after deck, a wooden rack where they stuck all the mops. Well, there was maybe a dozen or so. So in the Gulf of Mexico, we used to have to shoot at sleeves, toe sleeves from the guys from Pensacola, or the sled out in the water. Big sled, and maybe a couple of 1,000 yards out. And then when you had your earphones on, and and the port side ready to fire immediately, fire. So the sled is moving, the ship is moving, and I'm, going ahead and let go of the drums. Are 50 caliber drums. I forgot how many rounds are in there. And so I'm letting go of everything, and as I'm crossing my gun, you're in a harness. And the mops are right over there. And when I moved over, geez, I shot all my heads off. Well, after I did that, I knew I was going to be caught in hell because the deck officer and the deck crew would, what the hell happened here, But I couldn't help it. I said, everything is moving, and I've got my hand on that trigger, and I'm letting the whole magazine go. I'm not going to stop. So that's what happened. I shot all the mop heads off.
Now, you were in the same LST for the entire
Yeah,
time?
1,000, yeah. And so we went, after that we went through the canal, went over to San Diego, picked up quite a lot of stores and ammunition, and then from there we left, I forgot what days, I can't remember
Yeah,
the
that's
days.
okay.
And then we left and our first stop was Inuitak. And man, what a place that was. That must have been 120 degrees in that. And I was always like assigned to go in with the small boat to pick up the mail with the officer and the movies, you know, because I was on the small boat crew. Of course, they had quite a few other guys that were motor max that could do it, but most of the time I was called upon to do it. And when you went there, the island was just so goddamn hot. And I can remember noticing all these pipes in the ground with funnels, you know what I mean? And I wondered what the heck all these pipes are near these buildings and everything. But that's where the guys used to go out and urinate.
Uh-huh.
And if you urinated on the sand, it would dry in seconds. So they had to have it go down deep into the sand. They didn't want. So that was the first thing that got me a little bit concerned about when I saw that. And then I went to church. They gave us permission to go to church on the island. Then we left Inuitak and went into Pearl Harbor. And we were there for about a week or so, and had Liberty in Hawaii. And so now we go to Guam. And when we got to Guam, we were laying off anchor there, and that's where, I forgot now, I'm trying to think of the time, let's see, April 1st was Okinawa invasion, so I got to backtrack. March, yeah, about March. It was about March when we were there. So we were there, laying in the harbor, and there's quite a few LSTs. And you can see them all anchored. And so what got me was, while we were at anchor, we used to see the B-29s coming down from the north, see? And we didn't realize it at first because we just dropped anchor. And they would come down and they would go around a fish hook to land on the landing strip. Well, we used to go topside, and sometimes I'd get the binoculars and watch them. And then we would see speedboats going out fast out in the harbor because a lot of B-29s hit the water. They didn't make it. They were out of petrol or shot up. But then what was a terrible sight to see was when they came around, and some of them were pretty well shot up, and they couldn't make that air. You know about Guam?
I've seen pictures of it.
Well, Guam has a big mount, like Dover, you know what I mean? And the airstrip is on the top of that. Well, when they made that turn, they had to keep their lift up to get on that airstrip. And boy, some of them just went right into that mountain. And you couldn't see it because you could see the ball of flame go up, you know, when they didn't make it. Gee, that broke my heart to see that happen. Then you'd see them in the water, dropping in the water, and then the speedboats would go out and try to pick them up, you know. And then when I used to get in the water with my small boat going into Guam, I could see them in the water. I lost quite a few of them. I don't know how many, but I'll tell you, we were there for a while. But that's where we picked up Army engineers. And every LST was picking up a lot of people, that's all I can say, because we can see them coming out. And besides that piggyback LCT, we had the Army engineers. And they were quite nice guys, and there were some from Utica, New York, and Rome, and I think they were from Ohio, but I can't recall the regiment or whatever. We used to play poker together, so we had them aboard while all the other ships were gathering and picking up men and supplies. These guys were aboard for about a week or so. Got to know them real nice, played poker every night. Then, all of a sudden, everybody looks as the ships are all ready, up anchor, and then we're headed out. And I said, now we're going somewhere. So as we go out, and I think the next day it was on a PA system, they told us that we're headed for Okinawa, but who the hell knew where Okinawa was? So I had a buddy of mine who was up in the con. I saw him, I said, Mort, where's this place Okinawa? And he says, it's 350 miles from Japan. And we had heard about Iwo Jima in the meantime. This was about a month or two before. So I said, this is going to be a big one, because we had convoys of. This is my ship statistics, by the way. I don't know if I brought a picture of a convoy. I tried to take a picture of the convoy in the nighttime, you know, and you can just about see. You can see all those LSTs, see them?
Oh, yes.
Yep, we're on our way to Okinawa.
Hold it up and see if I don't know if you'll be able to focus.
You can't
into the
get much of that,
background
but
he can get pretty close.
Okay. Got it.
okay,
So that's on the way to Okinawa?
yeah. On the back. Oh, sorry. And so we realized that we're going into a big one. In fact, we got talking on the way up, and even the engineers. And so I forgot how many days it took us to get there from Guam up to Okinawa. Time starts to lose. You lose time. So when we get there, we lay off anchor, and then all of a sudden, a heavy barrage of big fleet guns, you know, battleships, cruisers, destroyers. They were throwing everything on that island. And of course, we couldn't be up there because we weren't attack vessels. So we had to lay offshore. I forgot, maybe, if I were going to guess, maybe 20 miles or more offshore. But you could see the flashes, you could see the ships. So this went on almost all day and night, and the next day, with heavy bombardment. I said, Jesus, there won't be nobody alive on that friggin' island. So then what they did was they started going in. We didn't go into the beach at that time, okay? We were laying offshore. So whatever happened, they went into the beach, and there wasn't really any, as far as I understood, there wasn't any opposition for maybe a week or so.
Right.
Then all hell broke loose, and that's when our boys started to catch it. And then when they started to move inward, that's when we hit the beach and let the Army off. And then we had to back off.
Now, on an LST, did you have the same problem with sand getting in as the...
No, this is on the big engines.
Yeah.
No.
You didn't have any of that problem?
No. No, they're two big 12-cylinder diesel engines.
Well, I was just curious if you had trouble with sand on those.
No, not that. The small boats, though. So then we let the Army off, then we back off, then we have to go back out, and we have to ballast the ship to the starboard side, take all the railings off on the starboard side, and I don't know if have you ever seen an LCT that's piggybacked? I'll show you an LCT, but I got one. I took pictures of it in sequence, but I couldn't find it. These are the Japanese prisoners. See, that's an LCT. It's a tinier ship, and it's used for men and equipment, but our ship was real big, you know. You wouldn't be able to catch that. So what happened was this LCT is on big 8x8s, you know, like big jumbo railroad ties, and they're parallel to one another, and then it's held down by dogs and chains, so during the seaworthy. So when you ballast the ship as much as you can, then the guy knocks the pins off, forward and aft, and the thing slides right off into the water. Now it's on its own. And so then it's commanded by a crew. Maybe, I think an LCT had a crew of about maybe 6 men or something like that. Our ship was about 120 men. And so, but then, and here's another story. The Army wants these big ties, or 8x8s. And there must have been, I would say, dozen or so of them. And now we get orders from the captain to bring them to the beach. That's a small boat. So the divers go in and tie up the ties together with a long hemp rope about that thick, that sucker. And we tie that on the cleat on the back of the small boat. Now we have to bring them into the beach. And boy, those suckers, you could run faster and walk faster on water than when you had those things behind you, because that was an awful lot of power or weight to pull with a 6-cylinder engine. So when we get to the beach, there's a beach commander there, and they tell you what beach, yellow or red beach, I can't remember. Well, you got to bring him in. So our coxswain brings it in, and he doesn't get too close to the beach because he doesn't want those damn 8x8s coming up, backing into our small boat. So I had to jump off the boat with the line, bring it up to the beach, and the bulldozer is there and just drags those suckers up like they were toothpicks. So that's the story about getting those damn things. But on the way back is the story. On the way back, we have two 30 caliber machine guns on the aft deck of that LCVP. Now many of them didn't have those two 30 calibers. Our ship did have those two 30 calibers. So while we're going back to the ship, it's now getting dusk, but still daylight. And that's when the Kamikaze started to come over. And you can hear the sirens and all the battleships that were in the harbor. Destroyers going off. They have a battle horns. Did you ever hear them? Clang, 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 clang. All over the harbor. Every ship is, because you get the yellow alert first, then you get the red. The red means they're right on coming on you. So I'm in the small boat with my two other guys, and don't they come, and everybody's shooting at those suckers. So I went back and I grabbed underneath the 30, and my coxswain's hiding down in the well. Get out of there, Briggy, you crazy son of a gun. I says, I don't give a damn, so I'm shooting. I was crazy to do it. I shot my 30 caliber whole box, went over and shot the same. I knew I couldn't hit them, but I just had to do something. So I shot both magazines, and of course a lot of them were shot down. And then I saw the battleship New Mexico get hit. She was about a couple of thousand yards from where we were, and a zero went right into the count. And later on I found I think they had about 100 and some guys wounded and killed. But then that was the beginning of it, of really combat for us, because then later on, when we were supplying, or else we were still in the harbor, we had to shoot at those suckers, and I was on a 40, I was first loader on a 40 millimeter. And so we got credited for 1.5, because another couple of ships were shooting at the same sucker, so everybody wants to claim it, but so they gave us a half meatball. We call them meatballs. So that's it. And then it was we were there for a while. Then we went back to Guam, picked up supplies, went back with tanks. We came shuttled back and forth with tanks and ducks, and every time we went back, we would hear, how far they were going, because I think that campaign lasted somewhere around 80 days, 80 or more days. Because I went ashore to try to find my buddies in the 105th Infantry from Troy. The old man gave me permission. So I went ashore and I hiked all over that island to find out where the 27th Division was. That's the New York Division.
Yes.
And,
What were your buddies' names?
now they're, I'm trying to think. I can't recall right now, but there were 2 or 3 there
Okay.
that were in the Army. It'll come to me. I got permission to go, so they gave me a carbine, and so I hitched rides all over until finally I got to where the 27th Division was. Then I kept asking, where's the 105th? And the guy says, they're up there, and he says, take that goddamn white hat off.
You were still wearing your white
Yeah, and so I had to take it off. I knew what he was saying, but I forgot about it. So then he said, if you're crazy to go up there, he says, the Japs are up there, you know. So I said, I got to find a couple of my buddies. Bavino was one of them. And so I got to a point where the guy says, see that machine gun nest up there? They're up on a knoll. He says, that's where some of them are. He says, I don't know where the 105th is. He said, but that's... So he says, go down low, but don't stand up when you're going up that way, because over that hill is the Japs. So I got up, and when the guys saw me, there was 4 or 5 Army guys in there. They had hand grenades all over the top of their bunker and the machine gun, you know. So the guy said, what are you doing here, you know, a Navy guy? I said, I'm looking for my buddy in the 105th, and I told him the name. And he said, you crazy son of a gun. He says, they're out there. And he says, you shouldn't be here. And I joked with him. I said, I got my carbine. He says, yeah, that'll do you any good. So he says, if you want to find out, you got to go up the line a couple of more times. He said, we don't know where but the 105th is up here. So he told me, and he said, if I were you, I'd get your ass out of here. He says, this is no place for a sailor. So I backed off, and I took their word for it, and I went back to my ship. Never found my buddies. But when I got home, I told them. But they were there. The 105th was there. So that was one experience. Never got to fire at a Jap personally like those guys, but we shot them in the air. So here's the engine room. See, this is part of the engine room that I was in. And that's me sitting there on duty. Oops, I'll hold them up. Yeah, that was tough duty down there because it was about 120 degrees all the time, and I used to run around in my shorts. And while I'm sitting there, that's where the ventilator was coming straight at you. You know, you could get a little air. But you're around 4 hours on and 8 hours off. And while we were at sea, I was in the main engine room or the auxiliary room.
Okay,
Yeah, the main engine room or the auxiliary. And when this picture was taken, we were at port because I can see only one auxiliary engine from the needles on the deck. See the amp meters. I don't want to confuse you, but
no.
see the generators, there are 3 generators aboard that ship, and 2 are always on the line when you're under sea. 1 for in port, for keeping the radio and the radar and everything, and electrical equipment. But the 2 are always on line, and you got to keep that amperage at right, and you keep an eye while you're sitting there. You look all the time up that amperage, because if the amperage goes down just a little bit to the point where it's crucial, the whole thing will shut off and all the ship will go dark. And boy, you don't want that to happen. That only happened once. And that happened on my watch. And the reason that happened on my watch was somebody, when the conning tower phones down, they're telling you that they want you to put more amperage up because they're going to throw the ventilators on the tank deck, because they had these big monstrous ventilators that carry the exhaust of the trucks and the tanks and everything down there. And if anything was running, you had to get those ventilators going or you guys would all be carbon monoxide. So what happened is somebody threw a couple of ventilators on without my permission because they got a phone down first because I got to move the amperage up so that it won't shut off the engine. So that's what happened. The engine shut, both engines, the generator shut off, and the engineering officer flew down there like a rocket with the battle lantern. I had my battle lantern. I'm trying to get the engines back online, and as soon as I get them online, they'd shut off. And I didn't know what to do, and he kept saying, "What the hell went on?" I says, "The engines shut off, and I'm trying to get them online." So he tried, and he couldn't get them online. Then he says, "Get a screwdriver, get 2 screwdrivers." And I said, "What for?" He said, "Get the screwdrivers." So I got 2 screwdrivers, and he said to me, "Take the governor off that one, and I'll take the governor off of this one." The governor's on each engine. The governor controls the speed, RPMs. So I took my cover off. He said, "Now trip it over to start," because they were shutting off all the time. So he tripped his over, I tripped mine over. The board went up, and I went up and got everything back on again. And boy, he was angry as a son of a bitch. He said, "Nobody called you?" I said, "Nobody." He said, "I'll fix those son of a guns," whoever it was. But that only happened once. And when that happens, all electric is gone. Your radar's gone, radio's gone. I didn't catch hell, really, because it wasn't my fault. So I remember that bad story. But he was a good officer. He says, "I'll find out who did it." So I think he did, but I don't know what the hell became of it.
So tell us about the Okinawa Typhoon and an LST.
Geez, that's a sucker, man. Who was with me? Oh, this guy out here, he was in a typhoon. No, he was in a hurricane.
Yes, yeah. I
Wow.
was just talking.
Well, my recollection is that after we were in Okinawa at the time, and all ships were ordered to put to sea immediately, and to put to sea and to move at 3 to 5 knots, 3 to 5 to 6 knots in circles. We knew that we were heading into bad weather because, boy, you could see it coming. But we didn't know it was going to be a typhoon. I didn't know, and neither did quite a few of the guys. So when we got out to sea, it became real bad. And when your ship went down, and you could see them, you know, the ones all around you, going up and down like corks, when your ship went down, you couldn't see anybody on either side because you went down maybe 75 to 100 feet. Then when your ship went up, that's how high you went up, you know, at least 75 to 100 feet. And when she came down to hit, you know, on some of these waves, the whole ship would buckle, you know what I mean? And then, especially when she came up, the screws came out of the water, you know what I mean? The deck plates would hop, I'll tell you. Well, this was the worst thing that happened. The bow doors sprung open. Woo! Water started to come in the bow doors. Captain orders all the black ink forward to get on the bow doors with what we call dog clamps. You know, you turn them this way, the clamp is on each end, like this, and you get a wrench and you keep turning, put it in and turn, put it in and turn to bring in the doors. Well, the water's coming in, the sump pumps are taking some of it out, but you can't keep that door, keep it open so that much water will come in because it's, I'll tell you, I thought we were going to go down. I was praying. In fact, quite a few of us thought we were going to go down, but we didn't. And by the way, in that typhoon, the cruiser Pittsburgh, now a cruiser, not a ship like ours, lost its bow. Can you imagine that? And a destroyer lost its bow. Because when we got through with that sucker over in about a day and a half or 2 days, I took a picture of a destroyer that anchored off our side, and I can't find it. I took a picture, and you can see the bow snapped off. But imagine a cruiser, that's next to a battleship. The whole bow went down with some men in it. That was a scary thing. I'll never forget that. You don't know how. Well, it's probably like what they had in Florida, you know, like a hurricane. But when you're in that water, you're never going to survive, even if you go over the side, because you go down and then you come up, and then when you go down and she hits a north wave, and then a couple of pipes broke. We had the guys, the engineers on our ship had to fix those, and then I had to serve one watch in that engine room, 4 hours, and boy, I prayed, because there's only 2 exits, and if that thing ever went down, it would go down like a rock, and you may never even get out of that engine room, you know? Was I glad to get off of that watch. The next guy had to go in there, but someone had to be in that engine room, in that auxiliary engine room. But it is a frightening experience, and one you'll never forget. Never. But when we found out that the Pittsburgh lost its bow, Jesus, that's second to a battleship, you know. How the hell that ever happened? But I don't know, maybe they've weak welding and weak something or other happened, but that's bad news. So that was something to remember when people, and by the way, when I went to see that movie, Cape Cod, you know, I forgot.
Oh, The Perfect Storm?
Yeah. That sucker brought back real memories. That's just the way it is. That's just the way it is if you see that. And more frightening if you're there. Then you can't control it. You can't control it. And nobody eats. You can't eat, for crying out loud. Because can't cook. Nobody can even stand upright. But that's one of the bad nights.
Now, after Okinawa, you were put on China Sea service?
What I was on?
Put in China Sea, the China
Oh,
service?
yeah. Oh, that's another. Yeah, we had to bring Chiang Kai-shek's Nationalist Army up to Manchuria to fight the communists, Ho Chi Minh. That's a story. I can remember the first load of nationalist Chinese we got aboard ship. And we used to bring them up in convoys, you know. And convoys, they were given Garand rifles, Thompson machine guns, howitzers, 150 millimeter howitzers, trucks and tanks. The Marines that were aboard our ship, they had I can't recall, maybe 20, 40, 30 Marines or something like that. They'd have to train these almost quite about 1,000 Chinks. Train them on all these guns by the time we got them up to Manchuria, which was about 3 to 4 or 5 days ship if we picked them up at Shanghai. That's where we picked most of them up. Japanese prisoners we picked up in Hong Kong, Singapore, and Shanghai, and we brought them back to Sasebo. But when we got them aboard ship, this is something you got to. I wish I took pictures of it. They were lined up on the tank deck, all these Chinese soldiers, and I would say close to 1,000 of them. Not quite, but maybe close. They had to disrobe all their quilted regalia, take all their clothes off. Then the pharmacist mate and the medics had to go down the line and spray them to get the bugs out. Took all the uniforms and they were thrown on the deck, off the deck on the island, and they were burned. Now, each soldier was laid in front a complete outfit of an American soldier's uniform. You know, the khakis, the heavy pants, no khakis, but I'm talking about the heavy wool pants, and the boots and the shoes, the socks and the shorts and the jackets and everything. And the guy up on the con was a Chinese officer who was telling them what to do, interpreting through our, whatever it was, you know, pick up this piece of clothing. So each man had to, after they were deloused, you know, they had to pick up the clothing, like they say, pick up the underpants. And they'd put the underpants on. They were big, always big. Now pick up the khaki or the brown heavy pants. Pick up the shirt. Pick up the jackets, and then the shoes. And they looked pretty good, but the sleeves were long on them. They had to roll them back and everything. Their pants were too long. It was a sight to see, but they finally got them all uniformed, and then they brought them down the tank deck, and they fed them. We fed them. The ship's company fed them. So now we have to bring them up to Manchuria, and the place was Chingwantao. Now, we were told that on the tank deck there were many trucks. I forgot how many trucks, and they had some 150 howitzers down there. Top deck, the Marines kept showing them how to use over the side the Thompson submachine guns, and how to use the 45, how to use the Garand rifle. The Garand rifle was bigger than they were, and they had to do everything within 3 or 4 days to learn how to do this stuff. And they had to learn how to use they had one or two big 155s top deck. So they were showing them how to load it. The Marines were doing it. And so the engineering officer says, "Who in the black gang has a driver's license?" And I said, "I do." And quite a few of us did. He said, "You got to go down on the tank deck, and you got to have a chink sitting next to you, and you got to show them how to use that 2.5." I said, "We can't. You can't run it. You can't move it until we get where we are." He said, "I don't give it, goddamn. You got to tell them how to shift, but on the dashboard has a plate, but they can't read English, and you can't speak Chinese, but you got to show them clutch, point, Well, I tell you, all of us had to do that to teach these guys how to use these 2.5 tons, And so finally, we get to Chingwantao, and they're ready to go. I figure they're all going to get shot up because all that equipment and stuff is going to go to hell anyway. But now we got to bring them off, and each guy, all the sailors that were drivers, had to get the truck on the deck because we were docked next to a dock, and the dock had a ramp that went up to the dock where our open bow doors, and then the ramp went down. So I drove my truck out and up on the dock. Now the dock was about maybe, I'd say, a half-mile long. So I had to show this chink that I was trying to teach for 2 or 3 days how to try this 2.5 ton. First was up there, that's right. Then I was clutch, point, to that thing was on the dashboard. Yeah. So anyway, when we get to the end, the Marine says, "All right, get out." He says, "Give it to the chink." So I gave it to the chink, and you ought to hear those gears grind, and you ought to see those trucks, all of them, that were coming down that line. I thought they were going to strip the gears right out of all of them by the time they got on the land, What a waste of material, I said. And we had to do that for quite a while. We did ship them up there. We'd made about 3 or 4 loads with those suckers, but you see, there were convoys of them. I think every time we sent them up there, they all got wiped out, or they turned them over to the communists. They all fled, I think, because we never heard that they did any good. But that's how we were ordered to do it, the Truman ordered it. And of course it didn't do any good because the Chinese officers were corrupt. And they sold a lot of our equipment to the communists. And I think they even turned over all that stuff that we gave them. But that's what we did for quite a while, did that.
Now, was the war ended at that point?
Yeah, the war was over. Yeah. See, the war was over because, and we were at anchor when the first atomic bomb, we were, I always try to remember where the hell we were off anchor. and it's very vague, but it comes back. But we were at anchor, and in fact, that was the day that we were all having Cokes. We were supposed to have Coke that day. We're sitting on a fantail, then over the PA system, the word came that an atomic bomb was dropped on Hiroshima on August 6th. And we were saying, what the hell is an atomic bomb? We couldn't, hardly anybody knew until we got word from the guys up in the conning tower, you know, because they got more information than we did over the radio. And then the next 2 days or 3 days later, the second one at Nagasaki. Then the war was over.
How did you feel when you heard that they were...
Well, it was a great relief. I mean, I can remember us all sitting there because we knew that the next one was going to be the island of Japan. And this one was a tough one, by the way, the one up in Okinawa, because the Navy lost 6,000 men. The Army lost maybe 7 or 8. I'm talking about dead,
Yeah.
not wounded. So there you're talking about 13,000 men. And they died right to the end. I don't think there were too many prisoners anyway. In fact, whenever you talk to a Marine, he'd say, we took no prisoners. I said, well, that's the way it had to be. But see, after the war, we had to take thousands of them back. And our first, see, that's me in Shanghai with General Chiang Kai-shek in the back. It's the first time that he was coming back to Shanghai. It was coming back to Shanghai in 1937, the last time that he was there. So this picture is him on the big building in front of Bubbling Well Road, Shanghai.
Okay.
And I'll tell you, I couldn't imagine the number of Chinks that I saw to welcome him. I took a picture of that, I can't find it. Like a sea of people all down. You would see like on Broadway and New Year's. Bubbling Well Road is the main drag in Shanghai. Well, I was up on this building where the USO was. I took a picture, a long shot picture. You could see heads as far as the eye could see. Because this is the first time he came back since 1937.
Mm-hmm.
But that's me sitting in my gun tub. It's the single 40 millimeter.
Okay, got it.
Yep.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the buddy I just visited in Philadelphia. He's the only one that I keep close in contact. He was my real good shipmate. He was in the deck gang. These guys were not in the deck gang. They were, this is me, and these guys were in the deck gang with him. But this was taken in Shanghai too. The one with the black hat is me. I'm the one with the black hat. You wear the white all the time, you get it dirty.
Okay.
Yeah. And see, these are Japanese prisoners. Like when we, this was during the war. Whenever we, like this would, let me see, this would be in, oh, this is San Bernardino Straits in Luzon. The war is still on. And Japanese prisoners were, when we needed them, when we hit the beach and you open the doors and the bow went down and you're going to take on heavy equipment, you want support underneath that ramp. And the bulldozer would bring the dirt underneath it, and then they would bring Japanese prisoners in to shore up the sides. You see? See, this is our ship, and they would come in and they would have shovels to shore up the side so that the ramp would be stable when and if you were going to take on heavy equipment, especially tanks.
So you used the Japanese prisoners for that?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then when we used to take them back to Japan, we used to, they would sleep and eat on the tank deck. let me go back. The first group of, when the war was over, the first thing we did was take Japanese prisoners, Japanese civilians from Jensen, Korea. We had to go to Korea to pick up civilians. So we picked up civilians, no soldiers, all Japanese people that had to go back to Japan. And there were civilian women and children and men. And I don't know what they did when they were in Japan or no, Shanghai, wherever they're at. But what happened was one of the ladies was pregnant. So our pharmacist mate was called upon to deliver this baby while we were on the sea going back to Sasebo. So what happened was he did the best he could, and the baby was born dead. So we had, interpreters aboard ship because we had the prisoners, well, they weren't prisoners then, but the civilians. And we had Marines. We had Marines, and Marines had an interpreter with them all the time. So what happened was the pharmacist mate got permission to throw the baby over the side. Well, there was quite a stink, by the Japanese civilians and the lady that gave the baby. So, because I was close to it, I knew the pharmacist mate. And what happened was, finally, the captain allowed him to keep the baby. And what we had to do was that the baby was put in a canvas, we had a lot of canvas aboard, rolls, put them in the canvas, and one of the deck apes sewed it up, and they threw it in the freezer. So when we got to Japan, Sasebo, we gave the baby to the woman. It was frozen, but at least whatever they did with it. So that was the first load. Now all the other loads were Japanese soldiers that we brought back. And I had quite a little bit of confrontation with some of them because we were given permission to take 5 or 10 of them to clean up the engine room while we were underway or wherever we're at. And they did a lot of ship painting too, shipping. Saved a lot of labor for the United States Navy. So one time, when we got back into Sasebo, we always kept about 15 of them, or 20, because they had to clean up the tank deck. Now remember, we had to make a temporary trough topside for the first batch. Those were civilians, where they could urinate and crap, and it goes over the side. We had seawater. So they had to straddle this position, and it was cold by then. And the women would have to go up there and drop their whatever and do their job. And I never took any pictures of that, but I took a picture of a guy doing a job at Japanese. But that's the way they had to urinate. But they all ate on the tank deck, and we used to have to cook their fish heads and rice. That was another story, trying to feed them. Because the first batch, they brought their own food aboard, which were fish heads and rice. Big sacks of rice, dried fish heads. So what we had to do was make up a long pipe, drill holes in it, put a clamp on it, tie it to the engine steam down below, and on the after deck, in the 30-gallon cans of garbage cans that were clean, the rice was put in there, and the steam pipe would go in there, and you ought to see that rice go all over the first time, because we put too much rice in the garbage cans. It went all over the after deck. It had to be swabbed off the back. But then we found out the portion that you had to put in. But that's how they were fed, fish heads and rice. And going back to the story where this officer was one of the 15 or 20, he didn't want to be on this work crew, because they had to scrub that tank deck, because a lot of them peed and shit on it down there. They didn't want to go topside. They froze when they did that, but fortunately most of them did, or otherwise they were going to have to sleep in it because we weren't going to clean it up. So what happened was he was very obstinate, and I was right on duty on the deck, I was on, I forgot to have my 45 with me, deck officer. No, he's hollering, no, he's not in Japanese, you know. The interpreter saying he's not gonna, he doesn't want to stay, he wants to go with his men. So the officer says, you tell that son of a bitch that we won the war. He's staying, he's cleaning up with the rest of them. So he's got very obstinate, this Japanese. So this other guy who was with the officer grabbed him and threw him against a ready box. I thought he killed him. Because a ready box is where all the ammunition is on deck, and there's clamps sticking up, you know. He took him like a rag doll and threw him, and geez, he went right over that thing, and oh, he let out a real. So then, his name was Gray. Gray picked him up, and he said, "You stay, you're staying." He's like this. So they had to drag him down to the tank deck. He stayed, and he worked to clean up with the rest of them. But I'll tell you, that was a take it, because he had a host.
Okay, so you said you went into Manila shortly after it was liberated. Describe that for us.
Yeah. Well, when I borrowed that Jeep from that Army officer, that captain, I had to drive down Dewey Boulevard. That's the main drag going into Manila. It's a beautiful boulevard. And when I got into Manila, I couldn't believe the devastation that was given to that capital. Of course, for both sides, both the Japanese and the Americans, because it was house-to-house fighting all through Manila. That's why it took so long. And monstrous holes with shells, you know. Could have been the biggest shell we ever had, or tank shells. But there wasn't one building that didn't have a hole in it. And but I finally got information of where I was going. I had to go to an Air Force base, and I wish I could remember it. But my friend, he's still alive, by the way, and we meet once in a while in town at either Price Chopper or something. His name was Jafarian. And we often talk about that. I said, geez, because he was wonderful, you know. He broke out beer, and I think we went to the movies that afternoon, because they had the base for movies. We had beer and some army food.
Did you ever get to see any USO shows while you were over?
One USO show, but it was the girl from, her name will come back to me. It was in Tacloban in the Philippines. She was the woman that made that famous song, "When the Lights Go On Again All Over the World." Her name will come back to me, Vanetta. Well, she was a top entertainer in the British Empire. Her name will come back. But what happened is you can't, when you go on Liberty at Tacloban, there's Army, Navy, British, and whatever. Everybody's on Liberty there, you know, for baseball and booze and crap games, and USO for the big show. Veretta Lynn.
Oh, okay. Right, I heard that.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So they don't give you the booze, and you don't do anything until you go to the show. Now there, you're talking about 115, 120 in the shade, and you're sitting outdoors in this amphitheater, you know, and there's several thousand of us, you know, limeys and every serviceman you can think of is there. So we're sitting on the logs and waiting, and she started singing. We clapped for her when she came on, and she starts off with this song, and boy, we all booed her, and I booed her too. When the lights go on again all over the world, we didn't want to hear that. And when she got those boos, she said, all right, I know it. So she started singing upbeat songs and songs that we wanted to hear. We don't want to hear that crap. When the lights go on again. Well, anyway, I'm sure that it wasn't the right thing to do, but there wasn't anybody there happy to, and who wants to sit in that shade waiting an hour or so, and then finally she comes on and starts that, you know, and the guys weren't too, let's say, agreeable to anything like that. After they're sitting, there's no shade. So when the show was over, that's when you go back and you get each man was given a case of beer. And that beer was, we used to call it hot piss. It was called Acme Beer from Brooklyn. 3 point something. And when they took it out of the freezer and you got the case, you had to drink as much as you can right away because the hot sun would, there would all be hot piss by the end of it. Well, you can imagine how many guys got bombed. I got bombed once doing that because I drank as many as I could. I drank about 8-10 cans, and that's it. Because you get bombed, you can't. Some guys drank the whole case. They'd go for the whole case. But then they would do, you play crap and you crap off your extra cans, you know what I mean? And you might play baseball if you want to, but that was too much for you in the hot sun. But then the trouble was most of the time guys got in trouble with the limeys. They weren't too sociable with us, and we weren't too sociable with them, and there was always a fight. And when that happens, I got away. I figured, hey, babe, I'm here to have a little R&R. I'm not here for that crap. Most of the time, I drank my beer and I played poker. But that Acme beer, I'll always remember that. In fact, when I got a couple of newsletters from my Scuttlebutt magazine, one of the guys on the letter said, "Does anybody remember that Acme beer?" Hot piss, we called it. Oh.
Now, when did you finally leave the Pacific?
Well, what happened was this. We had many tours of duties bringing the Chinks up to Manchuria and the Japs back to all over. We picked them up all over the China coast. Then I got enough points. You see, in those days you had to have enough points to get the hell out.
Yeah.
So I think the magic number for me was like 34 or 30 something. I can't remember exactly. Well, I had that because I had a battle star, which gave you more points and time and your age.
He just copied some photos.
Oh, that was all right. Gee.
Okay.
All right. Thank you. And so, what happened was, the war's over now. We're not finished doing what we're supposed to do, because now I'm getting enough points to get out, and my buddy Joe Hackett from Philadelphia, great guy. I'll tell you, he and I were brothers. That's why we kept together. He came to my wedding. He flew up for my wedding, and I flew down to see him several times. And then I just saw him last couple of weeks ago because our Navy convention was in Philly. He had enough, the same points, because we had battle. We got a Bronze Star, and he was the same age I was, and yet for so many months. So we hit the magic number, and about 8 of us from the crew went to the San Clemente, USS San Clemente. That ship was inaugurated in World War I think. It was an old clunker, an oil burner. So now we were ordered to go to that ship because that's where we're going to go back, the USS San Clemente. So we were taken off the LST, back, the 8 of us went, and then that's where a congregation of all sailors are now who with the points are coming on. 3,000 of us got on that tug. We picked up that many in Shanghai, then we went to Sasebo and picked up more, and from there, Sasebo to Hawaii. Hawaii back to the States. So, when I was aboard the San Clemente, the orders came from the PA system that anybody that was in the engine room report. This is all the sailors on the ship. Anybody who was in the black gang report to where you were at on the after deck. So they wanted guys to take watch in their engine room in the San Clemente. Well, anyway, I didn't have any experience in that. It was a terrible situation where you had to turn these damn things and the fuel into the big burners. It was an old tub. So I said, I'm going to have engine duty now from here back to San Francisco? I said, not me. I had enough of that. So then the guy's telling me, now you got to check this, you got to check the water, and this and that, and here's your sheet and all that. So he was a petty officer, and I said, yeah, okay. So I did that for about a day or so, and then finally I sort of neglected my rounds, you know. He sort of reamed me out, and then I was supposed to check certain things, and I didn't, purposely. And he says to me, listen, you better get the hell out of here, he says. You're screwing up everything. I said, gee, I can't help it. He says, get out of here and tell the guy you're finished here. So I got out. Because I wasn't going to go in that engine room. That was a terrible engine room. So I played with a little chicanery. I didn't want to stay down there. And I got out. All the other guys are getting sea duty, you know, laying on the deck and everything. And I got to stand watch 4 on, 8 off. I said, for hell with that. So now we go back to Hawaii. We get Liberty for a couple of days. From there we go to San Francisco, Treasure Island. And this is a little side story, and I'll end it all because I don't want to go in anymore. When I was discharged, I had a Japanese rifle, a .30 caliber, and a .25. I'll tell you how I got them later. Couple of bayonets, Japanese bayonets to go with it. United States carbine, .30 caliber, okay, 4. And I had a sword, a Japanese sword. A lot of guys had other things too. Machine guns, Japanese guns and everything. But now we've left Hawaii, and we're now going toward San Francisco. So we're maybe a day or two out, maybe a day out or so from Frisco. Over the PA system, the captain aboard says, all those enlisted men aboard that have arms, you know, foreign arms, Japanese arms, are to surrender them to the officers or they're to be thrown over the side. I said, like hell. I mean, I went through hell to get those things, you know. I'm going to give them to an officer and throw them over the side. Forget it. So this is what I did. And by the way, they were heavy guns to carry. You know a Navy sea bag? Mm-hmm. You know the hammock and the fart mattress and everything, how you roll it up? Well, I put my rifles in there, and I put the sword in the duffel bag, okay? That's that big duffel bag with all my clothes. So he gives orders for all men with all their gear to come topside, port and starboard, and open your gear and stand fast for inspection. So everybody goes, you know, you were ordered to go port side and starboard side and all that. So I go up and I'm standing here with and I'm trying to figure out what am I going to do, because guys were throwing their guns over. They wouldn't let them. And I was going to throw mine over. I'm not going to give them up. So he hollers over the PA system, port side, first inspection. So what I did is I go over to the starboard side, and I dragged all my stuff over. And then he hollers out, port side, secure, starboard side, you know, for inspection. I just moved my stuff over. and this is the true story. So I got my stuff. Now I got to get the stuff off. I got it on. But if you don't know the weight, when I got that Stalker stuff on, I'll tell you, I almost buckled my knees. I'm going down that gangplank, the sea bag, and that damn hammock with the mattress and the fart sack and all the rifles in there. I'll tell you, I thought I was going to buckle and faint going down. I got off of that ship, thank God. Now I'm on the Treasure Island. So now the trucks carry us to our barracks. My buddy is stationed at Treasure Island. We grew up together, played football together. Navy, never went overseas. So I looked him up, and I found him. Oh, we had a great time together. Then I said, you know, our other buddy is on a cruiser. And I told him that the number. And he says, that cruiser's hooked up here in the harbor at Treasure Island. I says, yeah. I said, geez, this is a real great story. So now the three of us are together, you know, in the mess hall and having cokes and everything. So then I said to Chris, you know, I told him when I had my guns and everything. And the other guy's name is Harry Dukmajian. He owns a wine cellar, or a wine business out in Wine and Skill, New York. He was on a cruiser. So I was telling him what I had, you know. And so since Harry was overseas, he had some souvenirs. In fact, he was in some not big engagements. But Chris Moyes didn't get anywhere. He didn't go anywhere. He was on Treasure Island. So I gave him my 31. And the 31 was, see, at the end of the war, the Japanese were turning out guns, and the barrels were not honed and finished. The stock still was in rough shape, but the gun was still workable. It's a 30 caliber. So I thought I'd give him that gun. So I gave it to him. He said, geez, Brig, thanks a lot. I said, well, we grew up together and played football in high school and joined the Navy. So then I had what I had left, my 30 caliber, my 25, and my sword. So when I got home, I found out that his officer took the gun away from him. I said, Chris, what did you give him that gun for? He said I couldn't have it on the base. I said, I would have taken it and smashed it on the ground before I'd give it to that son of a bitch. I said, he was going to take it for a souvenir. I said, I didn't carry that gun all the way from Japan over to San Francisco to have some officer take it from you. He said, what could I do, Brig? You know, he ought to. I says, hey, I was ready to throw mine over the side rather than give them up. So I still have my 30 and I still have my 25. And the sword my brother took. But that's the story on how I confiscated my 30 caliber. And by the way, I shoot that one now and then too. I had a friend in the guard who got me 30 caliber slugs, but I don't know if I can get any more. But I got about 2 bandoliers left. I used to go out to the garbage dump up where our camp was, up in Saginaw near Corning, not Corning, what's that little town on the Hudson River? Well, we used to go to the garbage dump and shoot rats with it. That's a good gun, that 30 caliber. So that's what I got. I got my souvenirs home, and I'll give them to my grandchildren. And I've got 2 bayonets, 1 30 caliber, one 25 caliber Jap, and 1 30 caliber carbine. So that's it.
Okay, did you use the GI Bill at all after?
Yes, I did. What happened was I came home. You couldn't buy a job when you got home because everybody before you had been in in a few years before you were, and all the colleges were filled up. So what happened was I came home. I went back to high school for summer school because I needed 2 Regents credits, history and English. I took that in the summer school, passed it, got my high school diploma. applied to 3 and 4 colleges, but there was no room at the end because all the other veterans were there before me. And then in 1949, after working almost 3 years in the American locomotive as an electrician, wiring up diesel, the headlights and all that other stuff on the diesel engine, I applied to the University of Colorado, and if I passed the entrance exam, I was accepted, and I passed, and I went to the University of Colorado, and I was there 2 years, but when I went to Colorado, I married. That was in 1949. I married a girl that I knew in high school, and she was a nurse. So she never left town before. She was 2 years younger than I was, okay? So we went to Colorado, and it was a new experience for her, but for me, I've been all over the world. And I loved the school. It was a great school. I really wanted to stay, but she got sort of homesick. And I could see she was a little melancholy, and she would want to call home all the time, and it sort of grew on me to think that, I'm keeping her away from her mother, but geez, I love this school. So to satisfy her, I transferred from there to Ithaca College. And when I transferred, what happened was the dean said he would accept all my credits. So, I was a freshman and a sophomore, and now I'm going into my junior year. So when I get to Ithaca College, he comes up to start telling me, well, this course we can't take, it's not accepted in New York State and all this other. I said, but I got a letter here telling me you're going to give me and put me in, going in as a junior. Well, he says, you got to have these courses in New York State and all that. So I was a little bit angry at him because I said, you're not keeping your word. In fact, I told him, I said, I'm coming from what I would call a gold standard school to a second standard school. And you're telling me that those credits are not acceptable here? That many? Well, that's the way it was. So anyway, I had a bend, and I said, well, I want you to do this. I want to stay in my class, which would be a junior and a senior, and I'll take, instead of the 16 credits, I'll go 19 and 21 credits. So I had to take the 19 and 21 credits for 2 years. It busted my back, but I graduated with the time limit that I had, and I got my New York State certificate. So it was a rough go because even taking 18 or 19 was tough. I had to take 19 one semester and 21 another. 19 and 21. So I had to do that for 2 years. So I got my BS degree, and then I got applied for a job, and I was offered 2 jobs. And I was offered a job at Colony, and at that time they didn't have really a big high school, and then at Watervliet High School. So I took the job at Watervliet High School. And I stayed there for 38 years.
Okay. How do you think your time in the service had an effect on your life?
It did a great deal for me because, of course, I grew up as a man quickly. When you're going in that young, and then having the experience of being actually in combat. That's another thing. And then seeing all the things that I would never see if I were a civilian, or even traveling, because I was all up and down that China coast, saw every damn city you can think of, and some you couldn't even remember. And so I enjoyed, after the war I was really happy and had a lot of fun, because we weren't on wartime duty. And then one of the greatest things was the GI Bill, because my father was retired at that time. He retired shortly after I got out of the service, and I know he wouldn't be able to put me through college because my father put my brother and sister through medical school. I had a brother and a sister that were both doctors, and my sister who was a math teacher, and then my brother who was for 2 years in pharmacy school. That was the one that went into the Army Medical Corps, John. And my other brother was older. He was a mechanic, but he was in the Air Force, the 8th Air Force. So John took advantage of what was left for the GI Bill because he had 2 years of pharmacy, but he went into education. He became a principal and things like that. He got his master's degree from Syracuse and went to Europe. And I got my master's degree at State University at Albany. Then I picked up 30 more credits beyond that after my master's degree. I was president of my teachers union for 16 years. I was elected 4 times. And so I gathered credits while I was still teaching. So I went out at a top salary because I had quite a few credits beyond my master's degree. And then what was very nice about it was at that time Governor Como gave 2% each year for 3 years. So my pension max was 75%. So with that, I got 81% of my salary. So that put the frosting on the cake. I enjoyed. That was the end of it, and I'm happy that I retired and happy of my school teaching years. I love coaching.
Okay.
I refereed a lot of ball games, and I'm still happy to be alive.
Well, thank you very much for your interview.
Well, it was nice to review it and go in the past.